What is going on, everybody? I'm your host, Adam Pross, and I welcome you to another episode of the River Run Podcast. What's going on, everybody? For all of you listeners who are in Ontario, smallmouth season is just around the corner. And even upstate New York, let's talk about that too. Yeah, it's getting closer. Bass season, whether you catch smallmouth, largemouth, you're out there river fishing, we've waited a long time, and my favorite time of the year is coming. I'm like a kid on Christmas morning. But yeah, no. But when we talk about river smallmouth fishing, we talk about tackle gear. One of my favorite baits to throw is a paddle tail swim bait, generally more on the finesse side. So like we're talking the smaller, whether it's a Kayak, even talking about the minnows through Z-Man. Yeah, those, even the spark shads are another one by Mega Bass. Yeah, great imitations of baitfish. So I thought this would be a fun episode to kind of dive into this, and I thought one person in mind as a guest, and his name is JP DeRose. He is a Canadian professional angler. You've probably seen him on multiple shows, Breaking Boundaries, Getting Schooled, Beyond the Cast. JP is, he's all over the place on social media, and, whether it's Instagram, YouTube. And so let's welcome JP to the show.
Hey, how you
JP,
doing, Adam?
Good, man. How you doing tonight?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah, so like I gotta ask you, for this is kind of cool because you essentially made a career in an industry where that's kind of it's not always, it's kind of sometimes can be far and in between, you know what I mean, to kind of have gone this long in that. What has that been like?
It's been a ride, I can tell you that. It was a situation of happenstance, actually, because this all came to fruition from me fishing tournaments years ago, and WFN at the time, World Fishing Network, starting up, I believe in 2005, they became a network. And when they became a network, they decided they were going to start filming the bass tournaments in Ontario, which back then I was fishing the CFT Super Series. And it was just basically, I got on camera for an interview. They thought I was very natural on camera, sponsored me that year. I won a major that year. They sent me to ICAST, and then it just started snowballing. They wanted me to have my own show within 6 months. And if since then it's been, God, we're 20 years now.
Wow.
20 years.
Like it's in some ways that's quite the accomplishment to make, especially when you think of Canadian, like when you think of bass fishing in Canada, it's a little bit different from bass fishing in the US in the way that, you look at, the US has a lot of like high school teams, you got big professional tournament circuits, whether it's the MLF, you were talking FLW, all the way over to, the Bassmaster, where in Canada, like we do share some of those similar circuits, but, you don't see its greatness, on that scale, the way that you see it, in the US, So for you to be,
we are a fraction. California
yes,
has more people than Canada, right? So
very true.
It's a population density thing. It's also Canada is pretty much not bass fishing for 4 months a year in Southern Ontario.
Yeah.
And our season is only, technically from the last Saturday in June until the middle of November. So we're at a huge disadvantage to function like the US does.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And it's funny when you talk to people, and you may have encountered this, and they're like, so like, what do you mean, like you can't fish for bass during this season? You know what I mean? They're like, what? Like I fish bass all year round. And you're like, well, that's like, I'm jealous of you right now. But yeah, no,
catch and release trophy season now, which is a start.
And that's kind of why I thought this would be, a really fun podcast to do with you, because as I've seen on social media, you've talked quite a bit about paddle tail swim baits.
Yep.
And, as somebody who frequents, all sorts of fisheries and, when we talk river systems, you've even, come down to where I am in Cornwall, Ontario. And,
Spent many a day fishing the river. Yes.
yeah, the mighty St. Lawrence River is quite popular, and people come from all over. And so to have somebody that can share it is this, it's kind of going to be a cool podcast to chat about this. So I like let's just dive into this because I'm excited about this here. So when we talk about let's just why finesse paddle tail swim baits for smallmouth? Like what's that drive for you?
Everything eats a minnow. Everything that swims eats a minnow. It is the natural order of game fish versus bait fish. And a swim bait is a soft swim bait in particular is probably the best imitator and is available in the most profiles and shapes and sizes and colors. And it's not absorbently expensive. So, you can get a whole bunch of different types and really dial in that bite. So, I break them down. The swim baits I break down into two categories: short and fat and long and skinny. And, the long and skinny ones are the ones that are going to imitate your emerald shiners, your smelt, your longer perch, stuff that is long and skinny by nature in profile. And then your short fat, and, you're on the St. Lawrence in Cornwall, you have a lot of alewife in that body of water. That short fat is a big thing for alewife fisheries. Anytime you have bluegills that they feed on, or, even rock bass or anything in that small, short, fat profile, that makes a big difference. So it's nice to have something that they make in both sides.
You look at when you're talking shapes, sizes, and one of the things that I've always kind of agreed with this is that what swims is generally going to eat something that swims. So for me, when I was going out there and I'm trying to break down water, it only made sense to throw something that's going to imitate a bait fish. And it became that point where I realized, to me, this was something that was worth, like, in some ways, kind of mastering this technique. And when it became, talking about rods and reels, and we're going to get into all that, but for you, what was it? When did you really find that technique was like really worth mastering?
Oh, I was throwing swim baits when I was like 10 years old. And back then it used to be a sassy shad
Okay.
from Mr. Twister. So, I've been doing this a long, long time. And, even from the days of throwing Renovskis, I don't know if you remember the Renovski swim baits. They had a
Yes.
photorealistic perch finish. That was something I relied on to catch walleye in the Kawarthas for a number of years as well. So swim baits were always a part of what we do. Whether I was even inshore saltwater fishing for speckled sea trout or redfish, growing up, I was throwing, paddle tail swim baits. So it wasn't anything new, but when I started to realize, as they made them smaller and more finessey, they started to play a lot more up here because of our clear water and our pressured fish. So you got a combination of, tap clear water in the St. Lawrence River for the most part. And I live on Lake Simcoe. I'm just 20 minutes away from it. I could see down 30 feet on Lake Simcoe. So super clear, super educated, super pressured smallmouth. Downsizing in a lot of cases is how you get bites. So the swim bait was a natural progression to be added to a finesse arsenal. Whether it was drop shot fishing, or it was throwing it on a ball head jig, or working it in a number of ways that you can work a swim bait.
Yeah.
It was something that I could fish from 60 feet of water to 6 inches of water. Yeah. So it's just a super versatile bait.
And I think, in my opinion, a soft style plastic swim bait is probably, to me, is the most, I would say, effective river soft plastic that you can throw out there. I just feel like that is just one bait that is going to get bit compared to other style soft plastics. I just feel that one, and that this is only my opinion. But I feel that is just one of very effective river fishing soft plastic to have in your arsenal for sure.
Well, so there's one thing I've learned. I've been filming Renegade Bass, now the Bait Fuel Fishing Tour, since 2016. We've been doing this for 10 years now. I can't believe it. And I fished tournaments for so many years. And I've learned there's one indisputable fact about fishing is you are better off fishing the baits you're confident in. And I think when you're confident in something, you're going to throw it more often. You're going to pay attention to it more. You're going to expect to get bit more often. You're going to catch more fish on it. So if you're really confident in throwing a swim bait, you'll probably throw it all day long and not worry about not getting bit because you know eventually it's going to work. Yeah. That happens with every bait. If you're throwing a Ned all day long, or you're throwing a drop shot worm all day long, or you're throwing a straight tail minnow all day long, I think the best thing you could do is throw what you're confident in. But not having swim baits in your arsenal could probably be a pretty big mistake considering how much these fish rely on eating small minnows, especially spring of the year or early in the season.
So I think that's really well put because for me, who's somebody who's all about the finesse paddle tails, it is true. Like the more you put into any technique, the better you will get at it. And the more you dive into it, the more you're going to start to see where you can tweak things, whether it's line, a reel, retrieve, length of a rod, just it's all in there. Weight, when you're looking at weight to the way the bait falls. So how about this? What about, so when we talk about choosing, like when we were kind of talking about this earlier when we were talking about size, when you put them into those two categories, the importance in the color selection though. So let's
break down the three things. There's three things, three parts to a bait, and any bait. It could be a crankbait, it could be a soft plastic swim bait. There is shape, which is their profile of the bait. There is the size, and then there's the color. If I had to rate them in order of importance, I'm going to always say the profile matters most. So is it long and skinny? Is it short and fat? The second thing that matters most is the size. And the last thing that matters is the color. If you have the profile right and you have the size right, you can pretty much catch them on any color. The way you catch more fish is by dialing in the proper color based on the water conditions or the forage that they're feeding on. But the two most important things are the profile and the size. And the way you figure that part out is twofold. Either you're going to catch some fish and they're going to spit up baits in your live well, or you're going to physically see the bait fish that are in the water. Or you're going to learn that the body of water you're on, let's say the St. Lawrence or Cornwall, the St. Lawrence section, has emerald shiners, it has alewife, and it's early in the season. Those bait fish are going to be smaller earlier in the season. And as you progress into fall, your bait selection should get bigger and bigger because it's going to match the natural size of the bait that time of year. So that's why big swim baits work so well in September, October, November. And that's why small swim baits like 2.5, 2.75, and 3-inch swim baits work so well, at the end of June, beginning of July, when the season's just cranking up.
Yeah, that's it. And it is true. Like, and you listen to a lot of people talk about that, that progression. And I really like how you put that, because when you think of swim baits in the way that you're getting, like for me, when I match the forage, like you can really, like, we'll just use Kayak. Kayak breaks it down, that you're working into your 2.8s and then you're working up to, 3s, and then you get bigger and bigger. And then by the time you get into that fall section, you could be throwing 5 and up, you know what I mean? Like it is there. But I really do agree with the idea that you're talking about matching the size to your presentation of what is actually going on in that river system. And that works anywhere, not just the St. Lawrence River.
No, that's a universal truth, whether I'm fishing in Florida or I'm fishing in Ontario or Quebec. The other thing to realize is that with all swim baits, they're not all created equally. You mentioned Kayak, and Kayak is known for a very subtle body action, but a very fast moving tail, right?
Yes.
Other swim baits have a firmer tail section, but that translates to more body wiggle because the tail is driving the bus. And it's because that midsection between the tail and the body is stiffer, it actually gets a lot of belly roll on the bait itself. So every swim bait on the market has a subtle difference in action. It's like comparing chatterbaits, like a jackhammer versus an elite chatterbait versus a standard chatterbait. They all have subtle nuanced differences. So, having that variety for myself, I've been fishing the Crush City stuff for a number of years now. And, we have a 2.75-inch Suspect, which is only available in Canada. And that's a super TPE, super stretchy, small, slender swim bait that is durable and has a ton of tail action.
Wow.
And then when we go to that short fat, we move over to what they call the Mayor. And the Mayor now is available in 2.5, 3-inch, 3.5, and 4-inch.
Oh, wow.
And that's short fat with a lot of belly roll. And then you've got the Heavy Hitter, which is short fat, TPE, lots of belly roll, huge belly roll. And it's available in 3, 4, and 5-inch sizes. Wow. So this is how I make sure I can follow along as the year's going. I use baits that I can transition through and match size, match color, match action that the fish want.
Now, when it comes from there's a few ways that I go with it. Is the faster the tail, the more wiggle we have.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to use that on a much faster retrieve. Something that has a heavy boot tail, I try to get down further and I almost slow roll that just so I can get that motion of that tail just kind of kicking past, giving the alert that, hey, there might be a pretty good snack down here.
Right.
But when you talk about, the Crush City, so we'll just use the Crush City as a great example. I think every angler probably has their favorite jig head or the four. Yep. So what would be your favorite jig head?
So one that has a good keeper to hold up that bait, and especially if the difference between a plastisol bait, which the Mayor is a plastisol bait, and Kitech would be a plastisol bait, and the Jackal Rhythm Wave would be a plastisol bait. That's that standard plastic.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of different keepers that work with it, but some that really tear it too easily. And then you work on the other side of that super TPE, which is a stretchy stuff like Z-Man has and Crush City has, or Strike King has. And you need a specific keeper to work with those. So when I look for a jig head, I look for a jig head that works equally well with both plastisol and super TPE baits. For me, I throw a lot of tungsten moon eyes, the VMC tungsten moon eye, because it's got what they call a broadhead keeper. So it is a flat reverse cone, almost like arrowheads, 3 of them.
Okay.
So they work good with both TPE and plastisol. The other one that just came out more recently is called the Minnow Shaker jig. And that's a VMC product as well. So a minnow shaker jig was designed for this whole craze of, moping a minnow, shaking a minnow.
Shaking a minnow.
But what they did with this one is they changed the line eye direction. So the line eye is actually at a slightly forward angle, but the keeper is 4 heavy pieces of monofilament that stick out from the shank. So there's 2 on the top side and 2 on the bottom side. Wow. That is the best soft plastics keeper I have ever used in my life.
Really?
But here's a problem with most jig heads. Most jig heads, as they get heavier, the hook size gets bigger.
Yeah.
That is the worst thing you can have happen. Because if you say my fish are biting a 2.75-inch swim bait, you can't stick a 4/0 hook in it when you get to a half ounce.
No.
So what they've done is VMC has actually made the minnow shakers available in a 2/0 hook on all weights, a 3/0 hook in all weights, and a 4/0 hook in all of their weights.
So when did this happen?
This happened last year. The minnow shaker was introduced.
Okay, because I'm familiar with the shaking minnow, and I've had another guest on, and he is big on that too, and had another one where he calls it the shaking craw. But this is great because that's one of the biggest things for somebody who throws a lot of finesse style things is I find, yeah, you can get lightweight and it works, but when you need to go up your weight, whether you're trying to get that bait further to the bottom or you're trying to get it deeper in that water column,
Yep.
I find that the hooks get too big and it's like
That's the problem for me, and
it doesn't
especially in a
work.
river situation where you have current,
Yeah.
you need more weight in current. It's just the nature of the beast. To maintain that bottom contact or get your presentation where you want it in current, you often need more weight. The original VMC hybrid swim bait jigs had that problem where you would get a 2/0 in the 1/8 ounce and in the 3/16, but as soon as you jump to a quarter, you jump to a 3/0. Well, by the time you get to a 1/2 ounce, you're pushing a 4/0. Well, I can't put that in a 3-inch sub bait.
Yeah.
These minnow shakers have been, there's the minnow shakers and there's the gripper jigs, and they're both have been done that way where they have small hooks and big hooks, and they go by, all the way through the entire weight column. I can get a small 2/0, which to me, a 2/0 on a swim bait is probably the perfect hook for everything from 2.5 up.
Yeah. You were just touching about current there. When you choose, like, just kind of your guidelines to choosing a jig head based on current, that's kind of, a lot of guys you probably seen go out there and having a hard time getting it down, but now you're running, you up that hook size where now it's introduced that, we can keep it down with that 2-0 hook, but, how do you choose your jig head based on your current?
The weight, it will depend on what I'm doing. If I am, let's just say I'm drifting with the current, I want my bait to be straight up and down under the boat. And that's the one key a lot of people don't realize. When you're drifting a river, your boat control becomes all on the trolling motor. So if you drop your your jig head straight down, and let's just say you're drifting downriver, and your bait starts going faster downriver than your boat is moving, well, that means your jig head's too light. It's being swept by the current. So you up the size until you get it to stay underneath you. Sometimes we get into situations where boat control becomes an issue because of wind direction. If you get an eastbound wind on an eastbound current, you get those stand-ups, so your boat moves slowly, but the current's still moving quickly underneath. At that point, you have to turn your boat and nose it downriver and use your trolling motor to maintain that contact with your jig under the boat. So I pick the jig head that is going to sit naturally under the boat with enough weight, and I can maintain that contact because I want that jig head right under the boat. And the reason I do is because you're bouncing over rocks and snags as you go along. And if you have to let a lot of line out, by the time you get snagged, it's over. It's locked into that rock, and you're going to have to either start your big motor and go upriver to try to get past it, or power with your trolling motor to go past it to get your jig back. So by keeping your stuff straight up and down, it lets you catch the rocks quicker, the bites quicker, everything. Your control is so much better.
Now, when we're talking about getting snagged, some people may argue that having exposed hooks, you're going to get snagged quite a bit. And when you're using, let's say, a weedless setup where, you're text posing that, for one, you prefer exposed, or we talking a weedless kind of setup?
100% exposed. Weedless will not help you from getting snagged. It's not the hook that snags the rock. Remember, your hook rides upward, right? Yeah. So your hook is really sitting upward. It's your jig head that gets wedged between two rocks. That's where sometimes the shape of the jig head can help you out a lot. One big thing I did for years, and I still do, is I throw a heavy football head with my swim baits, especially in the fall. I actually started doing that. Oh God, I was filming Getting Schooled then. So I'm on season 13 of Breaking Boundaries. I did a season of Beyond the Cast. It was probably 15 years ago. I was throwing a 3/4 ounce football head with a swim bait. So, and this is something that everybody does now. And I'm not saying I invented it, but I've been doing it a very long time. And the football head, because it's wider and the way it's shaped, it can deflect off of rocks a little bit better and give you a little less snagging issue. But again, you don't want to have it way out there. When you have it way away from your boat, it's going to lock up. The angle of the line, it's going to drive it right into two rocks and you're not getting it back. So try to pick a weight that stays straight up and down.
And you'll know that, right? You'll know that the moment you put that bait in the water, because it's either going to do two things: sink straight down, or it is going to be taken by the current.
Yeah,
And
if your bait's going past your boat, it's probably too light.
now, since we're on the topic of rigging, let's talk about rods and reels, because I think there's a lot of options out there, and I think with the Shimano hat on and the G Loomis content that you put out, I would be interested to know. So, what is, let's say, your go-to setup? Let's say for
so it depends on
Finesse.
what I'm doing, really. So Finesse to me is medium light and light power rods. And let's just, regardless of the line of rods, whether it's X Pride, Zodius, or Poison Adrena, or it's NRX or IMX Pro Bass, whatever it is, that doesn't matter. What matters to me is the power and the action of the rod. The power of a rod is basically, in its simplest form, is the amount of force it takes to move an object. So if you're trying to move a heavy object like a big fish, you want a heavy power rod. If you're trying to move a lighter object, you want a lighter power rod. You don't go fish for perch with a medium heavy, and you don't go fish for muskie with a medium light.
Yeah.
Now, the same thing applies to your baits. There are numbers on a rod. I could grab a rod right beside me here, but there's numbers on a rod that tell you not only the line rating for the rod, they also tell you the lure rating.
Yeah, your lure weight. Yeah.
The lure weight is important because that is the weight range that this rod is designed to load and unload when you're casting. When you keep your bait inside that weight range, that's when your rod becomes more accurate. That's when you can work your bait better. So it's really important to make sure your rod rating, the power of the rod, matches the lure weight. So if you're throwing, Finesse to me is 1/8, 3/16 most of the time. That's Finesse to me. So I'm going to use a medium light or a light power rod. Now the action of the rod that's the bend in the rod. So the faster the action, the more it bends towards the tip, the less it bends down the blank. The slower the action, the more parabolic or evenly that rod will bend. One hard fact about fishing rods: the more slow or the slower the action is, the less accurate the rod is, the worse your hook sets are. That's why trout rods are designed like that. They're designed to absorb, that trout fighting on super light line with a tiny, tiny hook. But if I'm casting or working a bait, I want fast 99% of the time, possibly extra fast. But most of my rods are medium light and light power, fast action. For length, that depends on you personally. I feel like length is subjective. I'm 6 feet tall. I fish nothing under 7 foot long. Nothing. 7 foot to 7'6" are all my rods.
Yeah.
So, but I know people who like 6'6". I know guys who jig in the river and use 6'3". Just not my jam. Use what's comfortable to you, but if you have the power and action of that rod proper to match the bait you're throwing, it's going to work better.
Yeah, I think I do agree with that. I personally, I'm in that 7.2 to 7.6 range. And that's just my personal preference. Medium light is usually where I sit. I do have medium. I don't really seem to ever go past it, but no. What about reels? Let's talk reels.
Well, 90% of this is done with spinning now. 99% of it probably with Finesse. When we're talking Finesse, outside of using a BFS system, and I don't know if you've ever tried BFS before, so the bait Finesse systems, which are bait casting combos designed to throw under an 1/8 ounce. Most people are going to use spinning. So they're going to use a reel that, for me, 2500 is the one I will use most of the time, the 2500 size. It's the jack of all trades reel. It can do everything.
Yeah.
If I'm fishing a lot of long line stuff, like I'm doing dragging on a lake, or I need to have a lot of line out, I sometimes jump up to a 3000 size, because it's from Shimano's perspective, a C3000 and a 2500 are identical reels in size. The difference is the arbor is smaller on the 3000, so it holds 40 extra yards of 8-pound test. So it's just a line capacity thing. And then you go from having the standard handle to the bigger paddle handle on the 3000. Yeah. The 1000s, when you decide to switch to 1000, and a lot of people, you'll hear them say, well, light power rod, you should have a 1000. The problem when you go down to a 1000 is the drag curve and the gear ratio and inches of line per handle turn change dramatically. A 500 or 1000 size reel, which would be considered ultralight and light reels, only have 7 or 9 pounds of drag at most. A 2500 and a 3000 has 20 pounds of drag. Mm-hmm. This starts to become important, especially in current situations where you got big fish and a lot of moving water, and you're fishing braided line, which I would always recommend to people when you're doing this. I think braid is the ultimate solution. 5-pound test or 8-pound test Power Pro is all I have on my spinning reels. And then I run a fluorocarbon leader. I want that extra drag to set that hook and make sure it doesn't slip and to start moving that fish. That's why I like the 2500. The other thing I like about a 2500 is it's an HG gear ratio, high gear ratio. Mm-hmm. It's going to move 34 or 35 inches of line every handle turn. So it's nice. Quick. You can stay on top of your fish. You got lots of drag pressure, and you have line capacity.
Now, I've seen this before in your videos that you've done. You've spoken about, Power Pro, and Power Pro is, usually in that 5 to 8 pound range.
Yep.
And would some people kind of say like, isn't that kind of light? Like that's
you get that a lot.
You're like that too light. Don't you want to be more in like the 10 to 15 range?
Oh, so I would never. So when I first started using braid, I started using braid before Power Pro was even a thing. I used to use Fenwick iron thread back in the day. And then, Spider Wire came out and Fireline came out, and then Power Pro became something I relied on. When I started fishing smallmouth a lot in the Great Lakes, I used 20-pound Power Pro, because you're like, this is great. It's got 6 or 8 pound test diameter, or 6 pound test diameter.
I think it's 6. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to try 15. And I went to 15. And then I went to 10, because 10's got 2 pound test diameter. But what I realized was the thinner the diameter of the braid, the better it cuts current and the better it cuts line, which means you needed to have less line out to get that good bottom feeling, which is critical when you're, dragging tubes. Back then it used to be dragging tubes. Now you could be dragging a swim bait.
Yeah.
So then I went from 10 to 8. And when I started doing some testing, I started testing the breaking strengths of braids. Braids on the North American market, Power Pro being a North American made braid, give you their minimum breaking strength. The average breaking strength of 5-pound test Power Pro is 16 pounds. The average breaking strength of 8-pound Power Pro is like 22 pounds. The average breaking strength of 20-pound Power Pro is 42 pounds. So if I get 16 pounds out of 5, and I'm running a 10 or 12-pound test fluorocarbon leader, I've never broken my main line when I get snagged. It's always my leader.
Yeah.
So why would I go thicker? I can get more line on my reel. I can cast further with thinner braid, and I'm not sacrificing anything.
You're definitely right about the way that it cuts current. Like if you actually do run like, let's say like 20 pound to get it down, or 15, the way that like 8 to 5 actually gets in there, and like the way that 8-pound casts, it's incredible. Like to me, it's a noticeable difference. You know what I mean? And when you do a lot of current fishing, thinner diameter braid is generally going to cut through that current a lot easier than that of its, a higher.
It's also more buoyant. The thicker it is, the more buoyant it is. So you get more bow in your line, which is not a good thing either, because you're losing contact. So there is no downside to fishing smaller braids. In my opinion, I feel like nobody should ever put anything less than 10-pound or over 10-pound test on their spinning reels. 5, 8, and 10 are the 3 braids I believe are built for spinning reels. And then for bait casters, I believe 30, 40, 50, 65, and 80 are built for bait casters. And that 30 is just lost in the mix somewhere for me.
Yeah. 40 is usually what I run for bait casting when I do have a bait caster in my hand. But okay, so this is good because it's kind of lead us into this next part. When we look at, so we got, we talked, everything from our selection of bait down to our rigging, all the way into our optional setups and to what preferred lengths anglers choose, but also some good in-depth on like talking about line and reels. When you look at types of rivers and their futures, what would you say are ideal for paddle tails?
In terms of,
so when we talk about, let's say when we're approaching current seams or eddies or deeper runs, stuff like that, how would you say your selection works there for?
I go off of what the bait is. I mean, it doesn't matter to me if I'm throwing, this swim bait on an 1/8 ounce and swimming it over a flattened 4 feet of water, or I'm putting a 1/2 ounce head in it and working that near the bottom and pendulum hopping it, making it look like a feeding minnow on the bottom. The type of river condition or current does not dictate the bait I'm going to pick. There's no finite answer to say short and fat or big tail works better deep.
Okay.
Or there's none of that. It's what they're eating that day. So for me, I use what I'm having success on. I will fish it from 6 inches of water down to 60 feet of water. I will just adjust my presentation with my jig heads and everything else. That's the big thing for me, is just being able to adjust and making sure that I have bottom contact properly. I'm feeling it. I know what's going on. The seams in rivers and understanding the current breaks and understanding, the structure under the river, that's going to make you understand where the fish are positioning themselves.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering there.
It's all about, for me, it's all about understanding, are they on the front side of the hump or on the back side of the hump? Are they on the side of it? Are they sitting up on the flat out of the current because it's really cold and they're being lazy?
Yeah,
that's what you use the current for. It's just to help you figure out the positioning and how they're feeding that day.
So when you look at, presentation wise and, you've made a cast, now we're talking like, let's talk retrieve here, because retrieve can kind of come in. What would be your most productive retrieve?
You know what? Shallow, I would say, really light jig head, straight reeling it a lot like a spy bait.
Okay.
Yeah, I use it as a search bait, and I use it as, like I would throw a spinner bait, or like I'd throw a crankbait. Or a spy bait. You just slow and steady retrieve can really, like on Lake St. Francis, it's one of my favorite ways to fish them, is get up in that shallow water and slow roll a small swim bait over the grass and over the boulders. When I'm on a flat and I'm casting long distances, I really like to have it do a short fall onto the bottom, lift the rod tip to 11 o'clock, hold the rod tip up there, have the swim bait swim down on an angle towards me, touch bottom, and then lift that rod tip, have it swim back up, and then have it swim back towards me. That is a lift and fall technique that works for walleye, smallmouth, largemouth, pike, perch. I use that for everything.
Very cool.
And then, when they're more aggressive and they want to be triggered, snapping that swim bait with a heavier head and getting a faster movement and having that tail kick on that way down can be a great trigger. But like I said, there's no finite way that I say is my favorite. My favorite way is the way they're biting. It's the way they're biting.
Okay. And it's kind of cool because we've kind of touched into this current aspect of it. But when we look at anglers, and what mistakes do you think anglers do make when they're fishing a paddle tail swim bait?
Rigging would probably be the biggest out of the gate mistake is how they rig their swim baits. And that is not getting them straight. That is a huge
off
problem.
to the side a bit,
A little off to the side. The hook is curved inside the body a bit. It comes in and has a wave, and the body's kinked a little. If your swim bait, when you throw it in the water on the jig head, does not swim straight down, if it spirals on the way down, you've rigged it incorrectly.
Another one too would be, and this is just me, but people who consistently overuse rip plastic, I find when you put that bait on, and next thing you know, like you have the hook, but the bait's like it's paddling off, and
even when the hook keeper will tear the neck, the collar section, and it doesn't stay up well. Crazy glue is a great friend to have in the boat for that kind of stuff. But I do feel like the biggest mistake right out of the gate is just rigging it incorrectly and not getting the proper swimming action out of that bait. The bait itself should have a tail kick and a belly roll over, depending on the bait. Some, like I said, the Kayak has got this little tail that does this. Yeah. That's what the Kayak does. But like when you get these other ones that have a good sized tail on them, the body, you want it to have that natural roll. And if you speed it up and it rolls over, you probably got it wrong as well. So you want to see it through its retrieve. How does it free fall? How does it swim quickly? And if it's doing it right both ways, then you've rigged it right.
The glue, super glue, is truly a saver. There's been many times where I've done that in a kayak where I've just, I need a little bit of super glue, fix it. I brought baits home and done that too. It really does save your baits. And if you're, an angler on a budget, you might get a couple more casts out of it.
That's why I love the TPE baits so much, the stretchy ones. Yeah. I mean, whether it's a heavy hitter or for me, the suspect, both of those baits, I catch so many fish on one bait. Probably not great for Crush City's bottom line, for Rapala's bottom line, but you can literally catch tons of fish on one bait, and that's a good thing. I rarely will ever go through more than a pack in a day.
Wow. I'm going to have to check out this Crush City. I've not dabbled with that soft plastic yet, but I might just have to. When you're looking, we're talking about just making adjustments when the fish aren't committing. How do you approach that when you're noticing like you rigged it right, it's getting down there, but like there's no commitment, like they follow it and then it's like they're stopping? How do you approach that?
Following your bait, you're probably doing the right thing and have the wrong shape, profile, or color. Right? So if you're getting a fish, so you're around fish, you're seeing fish, they're chasing slowly, lazily, you got to make an adjustment. So maybe change the profile of the bait, or the size of the bait, or the color of the bait. It's a systematic thing that you go through one by one. If you find that you change the profile and they stop following it, well, then you had the right profile. Then you change the size. So maybe throw one size bigger. If they get worse, you go the other way around. If they get better, now you're getting closer to it, and then you start playing with color. It's just a game of elimination, basically. You're eliminating using clues. When I do my shows, I always start with the first fish I catch. I say that's clue number 1. When I get clue number 2 and clue number 3, then it starts to become a pattern. But the first fish will give you your first clue. The second one will reinforce whether it's the same. And if you caught them a completely different way, then you start over again. But if you get multiples doing the same thing, you start putting a pattern together.
So, another thing too is, is there a point where you abandon finesse and you go bigger? And I think that kind of leads to, what you're saying there too. If you're starting to notice, they're coughing up maybe bigger bait fish, your size is off would be probably.
It could also be something as simple as they're not feeding on emeralds above their head. They're feeding on gobies on the bottom. So are you changing the way you're moving it? The fish to me feed in 3 different sections of the water column all the time.
Yeah.
Right near the surface, mid-water column, or on the bottom.
Yeah.
The 1, 2, 3 punch I've always used for smallmouth, no matter where, Lake St. Clair, Lake Simcoe, St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario, is I throw something moving, and that's my small 2.75-inch swim bait on a 1/8 ounce head. That's when they're aggressive and they're chasing stuff. I throw something on the bottom so I can either throw a Ned or that small swim bait and really just move it along the bottom and hop it along the bottom. And then I throw something that is near the surface. And if they're not eating those 3 ways, then I start playing with what they're eating. Are they eating a swim bait? Are they eating a Ned? Are they eating a drop shot? Are they eating a fluff, like a marabou jig? There's always something. Or the one that will always work, a wacky rig Senko.
Yeah, it's tried and true.
It's tried and true. But that means they're eating stuff that's falling. So at that point, my clue, because I do not carry Senkos in my boat, I don't like throwing them because they're far too slow for my liking. If that's what they're into, then a really super light jig head, like a 16th ounce with your swim bait thrown out there, is going to fall super slow, and that will trigger more bites. Sometimes they want it falling really quick, even in shallow water. You got to let the fish kind of tell you what they want.
And it is true when you talk about like fall rates are a really interesting thing to look at. And I think sometimes anglers really look past the rate of fall. And they're more focused on like the profile and the color of what they're throwing, when sometimes, like you're saying, like, yeah, what you were throwing is maybe working, but actually maybe downsizing it, getting a slower presentation, a slower drop rate might just trigger something, or speeding it up. You know what I mean? And sometimes I feel like anglers just look past that completely and just go, well, no, it's the color, it's the profile that's off. So
there's too many variables in fishing to try to nail it down to one thing. And it's all the years I've done seminars, and I've done quite a few seminars. I always say, people think fishing is simple as A plus B equals a fish, right? So pick the rod, pick the bait, cast it in the water, catch a fish. It's not. It's A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F plus G. You have to take into account water clarity, moon phase, wind direction, barometric pressure, water temperature.
Oh, this is good.
There are so many things that will affect the activity level of a fish, and they all have to line up to a certain number for you to find the proper combination that they want to eat.
Now, we're just talking, do you follow the moon phase?
I'm going fishing whether it's full moon or not. I don't I know the old
people ask me it all the time.
That it's so much better during a new moon or a full moon, or in saltwater world, which I spend a lot of time in, it's horrible around the full moon because the tides get so big that the water is very tough to fish the shorelines where we fish. So yeah, like usually people will be like, no, you don't fish until 3 days after the full moon. That's when they get back to normal. In our water up here, people say, well, during a full moon, they feed at night because they can see better. And then the daytime fishing gets tougher. Listen, if I'm going fishing, I'm not looking at the moon. I'm just going fishing, and I'm going to deal with it. That may mean I have to downsize because they're more negative, or it may mean I have to upsize and speed up because they're more aggressive. You figure it out. That's what fishing is.
It is true. Everybody's waters are going to work differently. But I will say this, though. I've had quite a few guests who've asked me if I follow the moon phase. And I say, well, like, I've gone fishing when it's supposed to be really good, and it was actually a really tough day. And then I've gone fishing when it said it was not a very good day to go fishing, and I've had a lot of success. So, but I think that's just, everybody's, it's personal preference to what you believe. But when you look at seasonal patterns, we kind of talked earlier about, the best time of year for paddle tails. And one of the things we just talked about was, that idea of when you look into June and July, you're getting into, that's a perfect time for paddle tail finesse style stuff, is earlier in the season.
And they kind of work all year, but what I will say is that the colder the water, sometimes the paddle tail is not the answer. I'm talking super cold, like low 40s into the 30s.
Okay.
I've always found that a straight tail minnow will work better when the water's super cold, because sometimes when the water's super cold, their activity level is really subdued, the fish, and they don't want that extra action on the bait. They like a more subtle presentation. So that's where I throw things like, a mooch minnow, or, a freeloader, or the jerk, which is a little tiny fluke, a 3.75-inch fluke. That's where you throw that stuff.
I like the names that they have for these, like the freeloader. Like that's awesome. Like
the freeloaders won a lot of money. Ask Jacob Wheeler about that one.
Okay, yeah, and I think that's where I heard it. But I do want to say though, I can see why that straight tail minnow it is going to work, because when you have less energy to move to chase something, having something that has this tail that comes kicking past you and looks like if I miss it, this thing's just going to swim as hard as he can away. Having something that comes subtly past with a little bit of movement just might trigger that,
subtle
ability.
is sometimes better, especially when they're negative. And that's, the negativity comes with that cold water, hand in hand. It's part of it. I mean, I've fished, I'm trying to think all the times I've fished Cornwall, and I do spend a lot of time walleye fishing there because I think it's got just such a phenomenal walleye fishery. And trust me, every time I fish walleye, I end up hooking big smallmouth. They live together. Yeah. That little straight tail worm, when that water is super cold, is really tough to beat. It's a swim bait without a tail. So, you talk about how great finesse swim baits are, but if you're not considering a straight tail minnow in the same breath as a swim bait, they're the same thing. It's just the tails are different. That's all.
I'm learning new things tonight. Like, and this is honestly something that I throw flukes. Like I'll throw a fluke.
A great bait. That's a bait that's been catching fish since the thing's been developed. I mean, I throw 90% of the time. I throw the 3.75-inch jerk, and that's what it is. It's a small fluke.
Yeah, and I'll rig it all sorts of different ways, and but I tell you, it definitely is one of those baits that it
gets jig head is hard to beat.
You can't beat it. But this might be something I'll need to go out and take a little visit down to Tight Lines Tackle in Cornwall and see what they have.
Robert, he's got a great selection there.
Yeah. So, and I think you actually at one point had gone and done a seminar there, had you not?
I did a walleye seminar, 2-day seminar. 2 days of seminar, and then we also we had some fun. We went, I did ice fishing on the St. Lawrence in Cornwall out of Akwesasne last year, and I filmed a show doing that.
Cool. That's really cool. That's like literally just right across the river. So,
yep.
Now if we could, if we were going to go with, one paddle tail color, if you had one color that you could pick here, and this is going to be like rapid fire. Okay. So you can only pick one.
Yep.
If you're ready, one paddle tail color that you would choose.
Gizzard shad.
Okay. One jig head weight.
1/8.
One river that you would fish.
St. Lawrence.
The biggest river smallmouth lesson you've learned.
Don't assume where they're going to be.
All right. One tip you could give a river angler that you think they should know.
Pay attention to the current and how it affects your bait.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so I got something here is for someone listening who wants to become better at river smallmouth angling tomorrow. What's the first thing you would tell them to focus on?
The deep water.
Yeah, and why? And why?
Because I think the majority of the population lives between 20 and 30 feet of water.
JP, this is I like this. This is good. So like as we come to wrap this up, I gotta say though, thank you for taking the time to come on the River Run podcast, man. This has been a lot of fun. I do think you were just the perfect candidate for this topic. And I think, I don't know, but maybe through listeners that they'll probably go out and maybe purchase a whole bunch of this Crush City stuff after listening to this. But no, this is cool. I always really enjoy having fellow Canadian anglers on this, even though we do both sides of the border. But I wanted to ask you, in your home of Southern Ontario, is if you had to give somebody a river to go and check out in Southern Ontario, what would be one that you would suggest?
You consider the St. Lawrence in Southern Ontario?
We could say the St. Lawrence, but I was just curious
Between the
if,
St. Lawrence and the Niagara River, I would
okay,
say
then,
there'd be the two. Yeah, Lower Niagara is unbelievable. For me,
yeah.
the variety is, I love it. Whether it's brown trout, big walleye, smallmouth bass, lake trout, steelhead, Chinook salmon at certain times of year. It's endless the amount of fish you can catch in it. The St. Lawrence would be if you wanted to go really have some fun catching small. It's the best smallmouth fishery in North America, in my opinion. So, the walleye fishery is pretty damn good as well, but the smallmouth are something special.
Before you head off here, I wanted to ask you, what do you got going on coming into the summer months for you? Are you gonna continue on with your production, get some fishing in, obviously, maybe do some more traveling? What's going on?
Got a bit of all of the above. So, Bait Fuel Fishing Tour kicks off June 26-7 out of Trenton, Quinte West. So, I'll be filming that series again this year. We are coming to Cornwall back to back. I think August 9-10. We got the Kingston, the Thousand Islands Open in Kingston at the end of July. We're in Morrisburg on the St. Lawrence River. We're in Cardinal on the St. Lawrence River. And then our championship is in in Brockville this year. So I'll be on the river quite a bit. Regarding my show, I've already shot 8 of 10 for 2027. So I've got a couple more shows to do. One of them will be a St. Lawrence smallmouth show, most likely.
All right.
And then I leave. So I've got ICAST in July, Amazon River in October for peacocks.
Wow.
And then I'm towing my boat to Texas come November to go take on a new fishery in Laguna Madre in the saltwater in Texas.
Wow. And now, is this the first time for the Amazon River, or
Amazon is my first time. I did Argentina last September for Golden Dorado, which was river fishing, the Parana River.
Wow.
And the Delta of the Corrientes, and that was phenomenal. They lived up to everything. They were on my bucket list, and they were everything I had hoped for in a fish. And the peacock, I'm sure, will be very similar. And I think it's just cool to be on the Amazon.
That is neat. And obviously, as a first time, have you caught peacock bass before?
I have in Lauderdale, and they're 2 to 3 pound peacocks, 4 pound peacock, 5 is a giant.
Yeah.
Here, you're going to be throwing top waters looking for 15 pounders. So I think that'd be pretty cool.
That is really cool. JP, like, I gotta say, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast and talk. And honestly, best of luck with all of your next chapter in your adventures. Like, this sounds really cool. If you're ever in Cornwall, definitely hit me up, because I'll definitely come around and cheer on all the bass fishing that goes on here. And I have in the past, but it's really cool to be able to sit down and chat with you. And for anybody else that does not know JP, and I'm sure a lot of people do, if they wanted to follow you, where could they hit you up? I'll make sure to link all
JP
this.
DeRose Outdoors on Instagram. I believe it's JP DeRose Outdoors on YouTube as well. We got to get back into making YouTube videos. Actually, it's been a minute because we've been so busy, and I actually spent 7 weeks in Panama at Tropic Star Lodge. So I just got back like 4 weeks ago. Wow. So I got to exit stage left during the worst winter I can remember, and spent 7 weeks down in the 80-degree heat. So it didn't suck, but I've got to get back to work and start making some YouTube content.
Very cool. Well, we look forward to that. My guest tonight, JP DeRose, he is, for Canadian fishing, he is a big name out there, always sharing his passion with the world and his content. Make sure you go out and check him out. And this is our podcast regarding Paddletail Finesse. This was a lot of fun. Don't forget, you can follow the River Run podcast on Instagram. You can also listen to it on Spotify, and you can watch it on YouTube. Till the next one, I'm Adam Pross. My guest tonight, JP DeRose. Till the next time, we will see you soon. Oh. No outro today. Sorry about that. We got
Thank you for tuning in to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, for future shows, like, follow, share, and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you check out our individual channels and accounts too. Want to be a guest on one of our shows and talk of adventures, gear, or products? Contact us. Thank you for watching The Noob Show with Matt Gibson, Chasing the Tide, Dustin Nichols, The Rusty Hook with John Rapp, The River Run with Adam Fraser Pross, May Contain Fishing with Daniel Woodcock, Chasing the 20s with Carlisle Esterly and Sean Lavery, Friday Night Bites with Brian Schiller. Thanks for tuning into the Paddle and Fin Network. Subscribe and always wear your PFD. Thank you for tuning in to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, for future shows, like, follow, share, and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you check out our individual channels and accounts too. Want to be a guest on one of our shows and talk of adventures, gear, or products? Contact us. Thank you for watching The Noob Show with Matt Gibson, Chasing the Tide, Dustin Nichols, The Rusty Hook with John Rapp, The River Run with Adam Fraser Pross, May Contain Fishing with Daniel Woodcock, Chasing the 20s with Carlisle Esterly and Sean Lavery, Friday Night Bites with Brian Schiller. Thanks for tuning into the Paddle and Fin Network. Subscribe and always wear your PFD.